Gold, ready to make a comeback? We'll talk about it. Everything's still awesome. New market highs. Everybody's happy. Dogecoin is up 500% in a week. Roaring Kitty is about to make millions in his GameStop options. Nick, did you hear about the shooting? A lot to get into this week. This is episode 113 of Bizarro World. I am your host, Gerardo Del Real, along with my co-host, Mr. Nick Hodge. Nick, first and foremost, are you down with VPP?
I am, and also ESG to some extent. I'm sure we'll talk about it, and why not keep the theme going? I'm down with Roaring Kitty too, though I don't know exactly what it is. I'm sure you'll tell me. How are you?
I am well. We talked a bit off air. Listen, I tell you, there's a lot to get to this week. A lot of police fuckery. So I'm going to give everyone listening a heads up. If you are here this week listening to the podcast for the market commentary, I will do my very best to keep that to the first 10, 15, 20 minutes of the show. Afterwards, there's a lot of officers gone wild this week. There's shootings all over America. We're going to do a dive into everything that's going on. But before we get to that, to answer your question, I am personally well, and things are good. Let's get into the markets. Gold closed up at 1766. Obviously, a great move forward after dipping to that 1680 level right at the end of March, beginning of April. I know that we're not convinced that gold is entirely out of the water, but man, was it sure nice to see it correlate the way it has to real rates, right? Real yields. And I think that, if you just superimpose a chart of the 10-year and you put the gold price up, it's clear what's going on, and it's a clear indicator moving forward. And it has been for months, as we've been telling you. Any thoughts on that, Nick?
I did that exact chart this week in Family Office Advantage, the 10-year yield against gold, because the yield was falling this week, which is weird, right? Because people were fleeing to the safety of bonds, which is weird because you have this sort of good retail print and the reopening trade is on and everybody's getting vaccinated and the Fed's balance sheet is expanding and the stock markets are at record highs and all that's great. But, for a day or two this week, rates were going the wrong the direction they hadn't been recently. Rates were going up recently and they started going down fast. We'll see if they catch themselves. Like you say, but gold acted exactly like gold should have acted when, rates are going down, and it had itself a couple of good days. I'm not sure it's the end, like you say, of this cycle, let's call it, but it feels good, exactly like you say, for sure.
Are you vaxxed and waxed, Nick? That's the new hot thing.
Oh man, I took Gerardo, so. I tried to identify the trends, and I was telling you months ago about the bikini wax searches, right? As an indicator of the coming reopening. And so
the coming reopening.
Finger on the pulse, as it were.
Oh, Mr. Hodge, you are a scholar and a gentleman.
Vaxxed, yes. Waxed, no.
I don't know why you put up with me every week, but I'm glad you do because it's very therapeutic on my end. Listen, silver looked good as well. Closed right below the 26 level, closed at 25.92. Good run for silver as well, but we got to talk copper. I mean, there's a lot of copper juniors, specifically in Peru, and we'll talk about that here in a bit, that are being given away. Copper had itself a heck of a week, right? It touched lows of $3.98, $4 here earlier this month, and here we are mid-month, and it closed at $4.20. Mr. Musk would be proud. Thoughts on the copper space?
Could be $4.20 on $4.20, Gerardo, coming right up here. And you separate them out. So I would say the same thing about silver, in that I see people getting excited heading back towards 30, people calling for it to break out. But I would put it with gold, and I would separate copper out for a lot of reasons. I mean, infrastructure stimulus reasons, real future shortage reasons, electrification of everything reasons. And I think it speaks more to the economic growth that the market sees, whereas the precious metals are something different. And I think that's why copper is doing well. So you have all those fundamental reasons, and then plus you have the whole inflation thing, right? Which is just like a secondary driver. Commodities, which are, you can argue about them. Krugman would love to tell you it's not. Journalists would love to tell you it's not inflation, that these are blips in prices. But to call them blips is something incredible when you look at the sheer rise in percentage terms of copper and it sounds like a broken record, lumber, and I know we're going to get to it, but Bitcoin and Dogecoin, and really just pick it, right?
Can we talk about Dogecoin? We'll come back to copper plays here in a bit, specifically the Peruvian plays, the plays that have Peruvian exposure. Very consequential elections there that I think are something to keep an eye on. You took some action this week. We'll talk about that in a bit, but we have to talk Dogecoin. I mean, what in the actual you-know-what, Nick? I'm trying to watch my language because it's going to get heavy later on in this podcast, but it's up 111% today. It's up 444% for the week. This is a joke that Elon Musk at, I think, 5 cents or 6 cents was saying, love the Doge and doing his usual marketing genius stuff that he does. This thing's up at 36 cents right now. And I mean, there's starting to be stories of people that put 10,000 into this thing and, are just banking and killing it, right? And meanwhile, gold companies that have estimated revenues this year of over $100 million are trading at an $80 million market cap. It's just absolute madness out there, right? Bitcoin is at 62,000, Touch 64,000. Coinbase had its IPO. Ethereum's at 2455. I mean, sustainable? Will there be a point where, because right now everything's being bought up. Will there be a point where people come to their senses and start having an actual conversation and dialogue about which has value and which doesn't? I mean, we talked privately, and the market cap of Dogecoin right now is more than the entire market cap of the entire uranium sector. It's madness. It is Bizarro world. A lot there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Nick, because I can't figure it out. I'm not smart enough to be a crypto baller.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that any of us are, right? It's a brand new world, and you're right that it's hard to identify value, and we're at the stage in this market where it's sort of in that discovery of value phase, that price discovery phase, because Coinbase IPO'd, as you just said, it soared to over $100 billion market cap when it came out trading. And then you just cited the market cap of one cryptocurrency, a joke cryptocurrency at that. Dogecoin is more than the entire market cap of the uranium sector, which provides the fuel for 10 to 20% of global electricity, and the largest part of clean baseload carbon-free electricity, and yet it's smaller than Dogecoin, and that's why it's a bizarro world. And of course, we think the value in uranium will be recognized, but that's not to say that the value of Dogecoin isn't correct, right? I mean, we've talked for months about NFTs and Beeple and what these paintings and trading cards are going for, and we talked recently about the property sales in the metaverse, right, in Decentraland. And I was telling you that people were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on digital parcels of land. And so far be it for me to say if the value of these assets is right and wrong, but for the crypto side anyway. But I would say that on the uranium side, at least, you can make a great case that it's undervalued. And you're right. I mean, I got, people texting me about how much money they made in Ethereum and Dogecoin. And it's great to see people make money. And I would have to say, I still don't think that it's one or the other when it comes to crypto and gold. I see a lot of
Yep.
ardent gold bugs still having their panties in a bunch about, why these things are valued like they are, crypto is worthless and that it's taking away or detracting from gold. But, I don't think it's the case. These people that are texting me saying they're making money on Ethereum and other crypto currencies, they're not people that own gold. I mean, they're younger than I am. They're in their 20s and early 30s. It's not like they sold their gold to buy their Dogecoin, right? I don't think it's taking away from it. I just think it's another asset class, and with so much money in the system, there's room for it. And with everything online and everyone in their homes for the past year now, they've had their eyeballs on armchair trading and day trading and cryptocurrencies. So I'm starting to ramble on, but I guess that's what I would have to say about Dogecoin. But while we're on it, I should probably just go ahead and tell you about the crypto voxels if you want to hear about them.
I would love to hear about the crypto voxels.
I know you would.
I woke up this morning saying, who's going to tell me about the crypto voxels?
Well, so crypto voxels is one of the virtual spaces where you can buy land in the metaverse. It's like a shared, it's a shared space. There's Decentraland, which we've talked about. There's Somnium space, and there's crypto voxels. And I'm quoting from the article now. All of these structures were recently constructed in the metaverse, a galaxy of shared virtual spaces. So this is where people are buying the digital land, which I've told you about. And so this article, as of this week, it says in Decentraland in the past 30 days, they've sold over 200,000 US dollars worth of pre-designed homes. So, okay, so now you're hiring digital architects who are real people, video game or software designers, to design your property, your house, and your car, and the aesthetics of your virtual property in the metaverse, and you're paying them real dollars to design this, right?
So just again, I want to make sure I am understanding this correct. A real person with real qualifications is getting paid real money to design me a fake virtual house.
According to this article, it says an artist recently sold a pre-designed virtual home that can be uploaded to the metaverse for 500,000 US dollars worth of crypto. You can buy a real brick and mortar home with a deeded property for $500,000 US dollars in many cities across the world, 2 in most or more. Isn't that crazy, Gerardo? And so here, this is the punchline. There's a property dispute already because this is the punchline. One guy built a German monastery in his land on in the metaverse. And then this other guy got the parcel next to him and put a rancher on it. But then he got a barn and some virtual animals. And now the guy that owns the monastery is pissed that there's virtual barn animals next to his monastery. I'm not making it up, Gerardo. I'm not making it the fuck up.
Look, let's keep it going. It's wild out there, everybody. It is absolute madness. You asked about Roaring Kitty. Roaring Kitty is a gentleman by the name of Keith Gill, who on his Reddit profile goes by the Reddit name Roaring Kitty. And this is the gentleman that's famous for inspiring the GameStop short squeeze. And so his call options that he bought in the beginning of this year will expire on Friday. Do you know how much he's going to net from those call options that he bought early this year?
It's a total stab in the dark. 60 million.
Well, I don't blame you for believing that it could be 60 million, but it's actually a humble 7 million, Nick.
Okay.
A humble 7 million. Meanwhile, in New Jersey, There is a
I
deli
saw this. Insane.
that is doing 35,000 in sales. I immediately wanted our Resource Stock Digest and Digest Publishing to make two separate SPACs and go public after I read this, by the way. We'd be billionaires. But so a single New Jersey deli is doing $35,000 in sales, and it's valued at $100 million in the stock market. Hometown International, with ticker symbol HWIN, owns a single deli in rural New Jersey and reached a market cap of $113 million recently.
Hey, provolone or no?
The largest shareholder, you're going to love this, is also the CEO, CFO, treasurer, and director, who happens to be the wrestling coach of the high school next door to the deli.
Love it.
I can't make any of this up. The company sold 2.5 million shares last year. It has 60 total shareholders.
So when I read that, I was like, good on the wrestling coach, capitalizing on the bull market, selling shares at high prices. Like, who is this guy? I want to know more.
I don't know what there is to
it's
tell.
Probably like Paulie or something.
It's probably Paulie, Uncle Paulie, right? Who doesn't have to move very fast because he doesn't have to move for anybody, right? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's going on out there. I do know this. Bringing it back to the markets and the copper plays in Peru, there is either going to be an opportunity in copper gold plays in Peru in the next month and a half or two. And the opportunity is bearing itself out. Whether or not it actually is an opportunity, that's the part that is to be announced. Because they have an election proceeding right now that is pretty much a person that says they will nationalize as much as they can nationalize, right? Including mines, which is obviously not good for mines. And then you got the other side, which will not. And so I know you took some profits on a company we both like, a company we both own, a company that we're very supportive of. And I thought it was prudent. I'd love to hear what you did, why you did it, and your thoughts. And then, we'll put some names out there, and I'm going to keep my thoughts as to how I'm playing it to myself, because I plan on writing something for paying subscribers on that. But I will give, we'll talk about the list of names that have exposure that I think are quality speculations. And we'll go from there.
Well, the company was Chicana Copper, and it's pretty straightforward, and it's actually a really good podcast topic because it sheds light into why we do things we do. And so I took half profits on the Chicana Copper, which you're allowed to do. First of all, I say all the time, you're allowed to sell stock and still be supportive of the company, especially when you were buying it when no one else was buying it, right? If you have money to buy it at 18 cents, which we did when no one wanted copper, when it wasn't at 10-year highs, then you can sell some when it's at 45 cents, even though you probably should have sold some when it was closer to 60 cents. But anyway, the reason we did that is exactly as you say, and I'm no Peru expert. I'm certainly no Peruvian political expert, but headlines are headlines and sentiment is sentiment and trend are trends, right? And so as you say, there's a far left activist, Pedro Castillo, a high school teacher, if I remember correctly, that has a chance to win this runoff election, right? And that's it. He has a chance to win. So like you say, that's the opportunity. I don't know if he's going to win. Some people think he's got a chance. And so that's why the exposure to Peru that's why we're talking about this, right, has come into question. And so anyway, like you said, prudent. We were up 160%. If we can sell half, even if it goes to zero, I mean, you know the drill, right? We more than made our money back, and that's a win still. So that's why we did it, and I think it's smart to do. And then you have cash, you can buy it back lower, and if not, then you pat yourself on the back for buying it at 18 cents and selling it at 45.
And let's be absolutely clear, the process in Peru is an absolute shit show. There were 18 candidates on the ballot. For the first rounds, Castillo's victory, which came as a surprise. The person that came in second place. The person that's going head to head with him in the second round in June. That was as big a surprise. It was the right wing daughter of imprisoned former president Alberto Fujimori, who, his daughter appears to have edged out her closest opponents. And I think, it clearly sets the stage for what can only be described as a far left option versus a very far right option. And, we're seeing it all across Latin America. We're seeing it here in the US, where like the extremist minority in each party, more than 80% of Peruvians voted for someone other than Castillo in the first round, and yet Castillo advances to the second round, right? Same goes for Ms. Fujimori. More than 80% of people voted for someone other than her. But because of the amount of people on the ballot and the way that the votes were spread out, this is what we have. And so, again, it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. It's there's a lot there, and I definitely am not an expert in Peruvian politics or Peru in general. But this is going to be an interesting election, to say the least. Let's get to some of the names that are exposed to Peru in pretty consequential ways, right? And so we talked Chicana Copper, Hannon Metals, which I'm a shareholder of, as you are. They're on to a basin scale play. We talked Recon Africa, which is I said and say I think it's going to be an analog to Hannon in the oil space, and Hannon, of course, being in the copper, silver, and I think soon gold space. But Recon Africa had an entire oil basin, and they just started drilling, and they found some gas, and they found some oil, and that company went from 20 cents to I think 750 is about where it closed today. And I think that we're going to see, if the drill bit and Mother Nature cooperates with Hannon, they have an entire basin of potential deposits, and I can easily see, a 45-cent company right now becoming a $10 company sometime next year if the drill bit cooperates. But again, that's going to mean nothing if everything is nationalized. Now, let's be logical here. They're going to start with the producing mines, and so I think that bodes well for exploration, right? But again, be absolutely clear, there is absolutely some risk there. It is risk that I personally am willing to take with the names that I am comfortable with. I've spoken to CEOs of every company I have exposure to, all which say they believe that ultimately it'll work itself out in true Peruvian fashion, which is volatile. But they're also CEOs of companies in Peru, so they have to talk their book, and I don't blame them for doing so. Let's see how it shakes out.
Well, yeah, and it's case by case, and I would have to reiterate that, again, when you're buying when no one's looking, you have the ability to make decisions on an individual basis. You don't have to, quote unquote, sell Peru, right? Because at the same time, I'm selling half of my Chicana. I'm exercising warrants in Hannon, and that's because of the prices and that I was able to get myself and subscribers in at. And so, do I think it's the end of the world for Peru? We'll wait and see. But have I gotten myself in some of these companies cheap enough that I can hedge that risk even to some extent? Even to be in the money on my warrants if Hannon gets cut in half? Yes.
Absolutely. What else are you watching in the space, Nick? I see uranium had, just a week of stability. I call it, a good pause before the next run up. Mines are coming back online. Companies are raising large sums of capital to buy physical uranium to keep it in their inventory to sell it at higher prices. True buy low, sell high mentality, which I love. But what do you think? You think this little pause in, the straight up movement that we've had in the past couple of weeks is healthy?
In uranium specifically, nothing goes straight up. The spot price of uranium, in fact, has gone back below $30. a pound. So that probably has done something to temper the euphoria in uranium. But it seems healthy. The stocks seem healthy. The interest in the sector seems healthy. And then um, more broadly, you're starting to see support, right? It got a nod. Nuclear got a nod in, the infrastructure bill. We're starting to see, I believe it was the energy secretary specifically mention support for small modular reactors. And so we're starting to see real like political backing behind it as well. And that's on the Democratic side, which we haven't seen in a long time. We, of course, know about the Section 232 and the uranium reserve that's coming. But that's all just specific to uranium. I think across this Cleantech board is where I'm going to take the conversation, because if you look at lithium carbonate prices, and if you look at spodumene prices, and if you look at uraniums or lithium stocks, like look at Orocobre, for example, which I have shares of from Advantage Lithium.
Yeah.
So, the clean tech space in general is doing very well. If I look at battery stocks, or I look at electric vehicle stocks, all continuing to do well. And so now I'm going to launch into my ESG and VPP conversation. So I hope that's where you wanted me to go, because
that's exactly where I wanted you to go.
We saw the launching of an ETF the other week from BlackRock, too, in fact, that saw some of the biggest inflows ever into ETFs in their ESG funds. And ESG has been around for a bit now. I'm not sure why we decided to call it ESG. It stands for environmental, social, and corporate governance. But that's a term that has just really sort of been invented in the past couple of years. When I first started investing in the clean tech space, which was nearly 15 years ago now, it was always called like triple bottom line investing, right? Where, you do good for yourself and the shareholders and the environment, right? And so the ESG thing is relatively new. But anyway, it's all the rage now, as evidenced by record fund inflows to funds that are created to cater to people who want to invest in ESG. And so the problem with that is, as is often the problem with themed ETFs, is that buying these BlackRock funds doesn't really get you pure play ESG companies, right? They hold a basket of, for the most part, tech companies that may or may not have some corporate initiatives dedicated to the environment and good social and corporate governance. So anyway, I guess what I wanted to say is that if you're interested in that sort of investing, ESG investing, clean tech investing, renewable energy investing in things that are clean and sustainable and good for the people of the world and the environment that we live in, you can do so by picking individual stocks. And it's something that I actually, started my career on all those years ago, was picking individual clean tech stocks back when it was the Chinese solar stocks. And I say this all the time. They used to be able to turn to the back page of the Wall Street Journal, and it would be like Yingli Solar and JA Solar were like the highest volume traders of the day. And so I've seen the cycle before, and I have a decent idea of what to look out for. And so I've evaluated a lot of the sectors, right? Solar, wind, geothermal, wave, energy efficiency, smart grid, all the components, right? And what's emerging, it seems to be, is virtual power plants as one of the best solutions, because we've known for a long time, and this phrase has been around for a decade as well, that it's not like a silver bullet solution. It's an all of the above approach, or a buckshot approach, right? Where you need all the things, all the different sources of power, all the clean sources of power, the smart grid to tie them together, the batteries to store them on, and the technology to link it all together and distribute it on an as-needed basis, even though it's a non-centralized system. And so all that is here right now, and we're going to be talking about that more and more, I can assure you, over the coming weeks in these podcasts, and also writing about it more and more on Daily Profit Cycle, because the companies, and there's not just one, although I'll be highlighting one here soon enough, there's many that are involved. Tesla, for example, has built a virtual power plant in Australia, and Elon, you talk about, Elon being able to sell anything. And he says that the virtual power plant opportunity is bigger than the electric vehicle opportunity. And so just something to take a look at there as ESG makes headlines, as the Biden administration gets behind it, and as that trend seems to be firmly intact.
I'm looking forward to you sharing your most recent idea. I believe that happens early next week, and we will put a link up for anybody that is interested. Any more market commentary on your end, Nick? I mean, new market highs. What is there to say? Everything is awesome. Things are, it's good times for Roaring Kitty. It's good time for Dogecoin holders, diamond hands. Things are good all the way around, right?
That's it. I was going to rant about Verizon, but I'm happy to get right into the police and the shootings if you'd like.
Nah, let's talk Verizon a little bit. Give my voice a bit of a rest.
Well, I'll keep going then. I just want to rant because we call this our therapy session. And, Verizon to me is, God, these motherfuckers, they're turning into Comcast, right? You remember how everybody used to hate Comcast? And Verizon for a while was good. It's just like they were the good network. It was fast. But lately just seems to be going downhill and from a customer service basis. And I would add also one of those companies that does their very best to pay the very little in taxes. And for a period after 2008, in fact, had like a negative tax rate. But anyway, I might have talked about it. Certainly have tweeted about spam calls in the past and how distracting they are, but they've been getting really, really bad to the extent that, I get them starting at 7 a.m., sometimes 3 an hour or more for multiple hours a day. And then I get like spam texts from random email addresses. So they're texts that come through from an email address. And so I started tweeting at Verizon about this because it pisses me off, man. You got to look at your phone. I stopped answering basically any number that I don't know. And so it's just distracting with your phone vibrating all the time when you don't know if it's a call you got to answer or not. So I hit up Verizon on Twitter and they say there's a app you can download, a spam app. And I'm like, all right, well, great. Let me download the spam app, which I do. It's a spam filter. And you can program it. There's like different sensitivities. Do you want to allow international calls? There's all sorts of little toggle things. And I set it up pretty strict. And you can also report numbers if they're spam and they don't get blocked. Well, this thing doesn't fucking block anything. Like all the spam is still coming through. And so now I spend more time with the spam calls because now I want to report every fucking number as spam into this app. So I like copy the number from my recent calls. I like go to the app and paste it in there. Report, like fuck you. And of course, there's a paid version of the app, right? Which I can only imagine stops more of the spam calls, probably taking the numbers that I'm reporting for free and using it in the paid app. And all that to say, fuck you, Verizon, because I know you know which numbers are spam because you control the network. I don't want to hear about your fucking 5G communications and how cutting edge you are. Stop the fucking spam calls.
Oh, God. And that is the perfect segue for my fuck yous of the podcast. This, folks, is the part where if you are a person that just has opinions based on your own way of thinking, or you think in terms of narratives and not facts, you probably want to turn it off. And if you have kids around, or people that are sensitive to foul language, you probably also, again, want to turn it off. If you are at work and you have headphones that aren't very, let's say, quiet, you may want to turn it off. There, we got that out of the way. It is getting very fucking hard, Nick, to keep up with the fuckery that police departments across America are committing. I mean, I don't know where to start. I don't know whether to start with the 11 mass shootings that we've had in 2021. A clear indicator that America is back and the vaccination rollout is working because people are clearly ready to go back out. The latest one, I wrote about one earlier this week in my notes. And sure enough, last night, there's 8 more people dead at a FedEx shooting in Indianapolis. So I don't know whether to start with that or to start with all of the police shootings and the fucking cover-ups that are going with it, because it's getting really, really, really bold on the police department side. I mean, I don't know what's worse. The body cam footage that wasn't activated in Baltimore, Maryland, where Peyton Ham, a 16-year-old boy, was killed by a Maryland State Police trooper. This kid was an honor student. Parents says he loved cooking. Of course the family's going to say the kid was a delight. Apparently he was, because he's 16, he had an airsoft gun and a knife. And supposedly the cops pulled up a la Tamir Rice, and he pointed the replica toy gun at the trooper, is what the trooper says. And this is important because I no fucking longer believe the troopers. Because every time I try to give these assholes the benefit of the doubt, I am proven wrong. So when the trooper says that the 16-year-old honor student pointed a replica toy gun at the officer, I frankly do not believe him. And I do not believe him or her because the officer chose not to activate the body cam footage. As the week progresses, I'm made aware that in a city that is near and dear to my heart, that I'm back at every summer, Chicago, that the police was starting to make preparations in the city because they were afraid of the response to the releasing of body cam footage. The body cam footage that was being released is of the fatal shooting, police shooting of a 13-year-old by the name of Adam Toledo. And so what we were told on March 29th by the officer, by the police union, by the police department, what we were told is that this 13-year-old kid was in an alley in the city and that the officer was faced with a life-threatening and deadly force situation. These are his words, in which he was left with no other option. Eric Stillman is the officer's name. Eric Stillman is the officer who encountered Adam in an alley. And let's assume the worst, because I read the little Twitter comments, which I shouldn't have done. He's 13. Let's assume the worst. He's in Chicago. He's in an alley. Maybe he's in a gang. Maybe his nickname is Little Murder. I made that up. Maybe his nickname is Little Murder Would Like to Kill a Cop. I made that up. That doesn't allow anyone, especially a police officer, to run up on this kid, tell him, quote, put your fucking hands up. And we know this now from the footage. Kid puts his hands up. Stop fucking talking to me. Kid stops talking to him, still with his hands up. And the next thing that happens, that was the life and death threatening deadly force situation Mr. Stillman was faced with. The kid having his hands up. And the next thing that happens, he gets a shot right to his chest. That little boy was executed in an alley. You know what we were told when the execution happened before the body footage? That the offender had a gun in his right hand. That he came to a fence. That he looked at the officer and he looked like he was attempting to acquire a target and began to turn to face to the officer attempting to swing the gun in his direction. And that was the life-threatening deadly force situation. And of course, we now know that's just complete bullshit. And so, for those of you that want to assume the worst of this 13-year-old, I will ask you a simple question. When an officer appears to threaten everyday Joe or Granny Smith on the streets, and a citizen feels like they are being put in a life and death situation, does that then excuse us citizens and allow for us to just blow his fucking head off? because it just looks to me, Nick, like the farm to table version of corruption and executions of people in cities, in suburbs, whether it's Maryland, whether it's Chicago, whether it's an Army lieutenant in North Carolina in fatigues, an Army medic getting pepper sprayed. And again, the officer said, he wasn't compliant. And we see from the video, yes, he didn't want to step out. You know why he didn't want to step out? Because he was afraid you were going to light his ass up. That's why he didn't want to step out. And then again, it's not Thursday yet. And there's another one. Dante Wright, 10 minutes away from where the trial of Derek Chauvin, the asshole that killed George Floyd. We haven't even talked about that trial is going because the bodies are literally stacking up. So for those of you not familiar, Dante Wright, who, yes, Twitter found him holding a gun. He had a picture of a gun one day. He gets pulled over for having air fresheners hung on his mirror. And when he gets pulled over, he's told to stay outside of his car. And he says, I have every right to go back in my car. And he attempts to get back into his car. He was pulled over for a traffic violation related to expired registration tags, which they discovered after he was pulled over for the dangling air fresheners. He steps back in his vehicle, and I'm supposed to believe that the officer mistook the taser for a gun. An officer that's got over 2 decades of experience and is heard yelling on the body cam video, which again, it's critical because you can't trust these motherfuckers anymore. Yelling, I just shot him. Mr. Wright drove for several blocks. He was shot multiple times, obviously struck another vehicle because he's bleeding out, and he died. And the police chief wants to tell me, average Joe citizen with half a brain, it is my belief that the officer had the intention to deploy their taser, but instead shot Mr. Wright with a single bullet. They pulled him over because he had air fresheners hanging from his rear view mirror. So again, for anybody out there that wants to excuse the shootings with, he once held a gun. Why did he have expired tags? Why didn't he just comply? Why did he go back into the vehicle? Why this? Why that? Take the other side. And if it's good for the goose, maybe it's good for the gander. And I'm afraid it's headed in that direction, Nick, because I don't know unless there's some serious reform. And we're starting to see signs of it in certain places, including Maryland, by the way, which, just vetoed its police bill of rights. And we'll talk about that another week. But I don't know how this doesn't escalate into a situation that is us versus them and us being the citizenry versus the police. And I hate that because, yes, I know that being a cop is a dangerous job. And yes, I know that they do a lot of good work. And yes, I come from a town where there is no law other than organized crime. And of course, I don't want that for this country because I love it. But this has to stop. It is not sustainable. Babies are literally being killed. Cops are lying about it. And the only time we find out is if there's body cam footage.
Well, and even when there's body cam footage, oftentimes there's little accountability because cops in many cases have been given so much authority and immunity and protection that there's never a lot of follow-ups, certainly not a lot of criminal charges, oftentimes a lot of desk assignments and shuffling around to other departments. Reminiscent of the shuffling around of rapist priests, if I'm being honest. And you forgot.
I got a police captain we'll talk about in a second out of Boston as well. We'll talk about that. It wasn't just priests, it was cops too.
Well, that's a whole nother podcast. I mean, police pulling girls over for blowjobs is a known thing. And that's a whole another thing. It's just part of the
I'll save it for next week.
right, the rotten culture. But you forgot one. So that's what I was saying about even when there's body cam footage available, sometimes the stories don't even get a lot of coverage, because there was one in Los Angeles that police shot a man, and the footage was released this week, and the gentleman was holding a hammer. The police followed him for 15 minutes, telling him to drop the hammer, shot him with rubber bullets, used less lethal means of deployment. Finally, the guy drops the hammer. He's asking for help and still ends up getting shot to death by the police. And there's footage of it. I mean, it just doesn't make any logical sense why that person had to die for carrying a hammer down the street when the police had already been following him for a quarter of an hour. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And so I wrote down a little bit of notes while you were talking. So, first of all, it's not the police's job to be a judge, jury, and executioner, starting with the Chicago case, right? The boy had dropped the gun. The boy had his hands in the air. He was complying. If you are complying, you do not die at the hands of police. That's like a fundamental tenet of freedom in America, right? And so
supposed to be, yes.
You can't have people being killed in the street while they are complying. And so there needs to be an utter and literal retraining of police departments in America. There also needs to be a changing of the war on drugs and the authority that we give police to pull people over. There is no reason and that a cop should be allowed to pull someone over for having air freshener in their car. And yet, through previous court rulings, we know that a cop can subjectively pull you over, citing nearly anything to get, to initially make contact with you, right? And so that entire thing needs to change, so we limit the ways and the frequency that cops have to interact with people, frankly, because cops don't need to be interacting with people all that much. And that speaks to also like traffic infractions and things. Like, we don't need armed police officers to be pulling people over for burnout taillights. That's like some of those easy things need to change. And then you talk about some states are starting to do things. We talked a couple of weeks ago about, in New York taking away the qualified immunity, and Maryland has taken away the Bill of Rights. And on a personal note, I've talked before about my brother-in-law, who I had a chance to see recently because I went back to Maryland for Easter, and we had a nice thing. We're cordial. I love him and his kids. Obviously, he's my sister's husband, and the conversation came to it. The Maryland taking away the Bill of Rights, and he's one of these thin blue line guys, and we get into it as we often do. Right at dinner, and I'm telling him, because I always hold my ground, right? I don't like shy away from the argument. I come right at it, and it's like he was saying. Well, he said if they take away the cops' Bill of Rights, they're not going to do anything. And without missing a beat, I said, Adam, cops don't do anything now anyway. Like, if you look at the statistics for solved crimes, et cetera, it's abysmal. Like, cops don't do anything. And so let's get them actually solving those crimes and off the beat, the stuff that I just talked about, the traffic stuff and the stupid drug stuff. And then maybe cops could do something, and let's stop protecting them with these bills of rights and this qualified immunity. Because you know what? When a cop knows that he can pull you over, or she can pull you over for anything, order you out of the car, and compliance is subjective. And then once you don't get out of the car, it can escalate quickly because they perceive themselves in danger, as we've seen time and time again, right? No matter what the danger is. And so, it's crazy. I think that, the Bill of Rights thing and the qualified immunity is a good place to start, because when they know they have those protections and they know they can, like I just said, pull you over for anything, say that you weren't complying, say that they felt that they were in danger, then nothing is going to change as far as how they interact with the public, which has clearly become a tenuous relationship. And if they don't have that qualified immunity and that Bill of Rights, maybe they think twice about pulling that trigger, or maybe they delay a second and don't mistake that gun for, or that taser for a gun, right?
Again, just a simple question. Is one life worth more than the other? And if I am in a situation, or someone is in a situation where they feel like an officer is threatening their life, or they are in danger, like the Army medic, the Army lieutenant in North Carolina, who was pulled over by cops and was told to get out and said, honestly, sir, I am afraid to get out. Those were his exact.
The cop said you should be.
Words. I'm a Second Amendment citizen with access to a handgun. Do I wait and hope that this guy doesn't shoot me when I comply? Or do I protect my family's future by making sure I'm around?
Yeah, that's crazy.
And it's a hell of a question to ask. But I tell you what, you can only do this to people so many times before people quit asking.
Well, you said the other week it could be another hot summer, and from some of the videos I'm seeing, and obviously what's happening in Chicago now, that's shaping up to certainly be the case. And so, eyes on this Chauvin case. Obviously, sad about the continued mass shootings, and the police stuff is, I think, starting to go in the right direction, not with their behavior and the frequency of these shootings we have to talk about, but as far as the public's receptiveness to and the politicians' willingness to start enacting things to make it go in the other direction.
It's just out of hand. I mean, we didn't even talk about Indianapolis. 8 people were killed, 5 people with gunshot wounds that were injured. 19-year-old kid, Brandon Scott Hull, went in, a former employee, and just shot up the place, and it's just getting hard to keep up. It's just getting hard to keep up. There's so much going on that it really is tough to digest all of it. I will say this, we don't like to offer up problems without solutions, and this one is a bit of a riddle. We know that police departments need to get retrained. I am fully supportive of good law enforcement that does a lot of good work. I think the focus needs to be more on, some of the other stuff. Go get the rapists, go get the sex offenders, go get, the violent members in the community. Go dedicate all your time to that. Reallocate funds for traffic stops and mental health responses and all of that. Do that to train professionals that don't feel threatened every time somebody blinks. And with that being said, look, New York City last year paid out $700 million to settle complaints against the New York Police Department. So when we talk about defunding the police, that is a horrible marketing slogan, but it's the citizenry getting defunded. If I was in New York and I'm paying 50% of my taxes or of my income to taxes, and in response, I got to deal with New York police cops having to pay out $700 million to settle claims against them. That's just the stuff they settled on. The people are getting fleeced when they're not busy getting shot. It's madness. Yeah.
Money could be so much better spent elsewhere, right?
So much better. So much better. Better training, better equipment for cops, higher wages, more selective hiring of these officers. More accountability.
It's exactly what I said. My brother-in-law, I was saying some of these same things, and my brother-in-law was saying, how are you going to pay for it? And I said, we can start by selling the MRAPs, for crying out loud.
On a lighter note, former governor and Secretary of Energy of the great state of Texas, or former governor of Texas and Secretary of Energy, Rick Perry, is pushing for the use of psychedelics to treat PTSD, coming from a very conservative leaning political philosophy that Mr. Perry has, I was pleasantly surprised. I know you and I talked off air about several deals in the space, but I thought that him coming out and saying, hey, look, the science is actually telling us that this could be an effective and far more effective than antidepressants, some of the other stuff that are the current, options for vets and officers with PTSD and everyday people, with PTSD. I think it's a step in the right direction. And by the way, like we said last week, right, it's also a great revenue stream as we're starting to see across the country. But I thought that was a good positive story. That's my happy story for the day.
I like it. The first study was out this week, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, that was comparing psilocybin to Lexapro, essentially, to treat depression, and outperformed the pharmaceutical. And so the mushroom space definitely starting to gain traction. I see lots of interest from it, from the retail investment side of things, and obviously seemingly following the same trajectory as cannabis, right, with some states taking early initiatives to decriminalize it, and now research being done on it in the medical field. So and also anecdotally, tales of a significant recreational use, not as you would imagine, taking a dose of mushrooms and tripping hard for a couple of hours, but microdosing in the form of edibles, and that's sort of what the medical interest is, right? And so yeah, it's very interesting, something to keep an eye on for sure.
A lot. For those of you that sat through the whole podcast today, thank you. That was very therapeutic. And look, I know, for my Canadian friends, my Australian friends, people from around the world, my Scottish friends, like people that listen and write in all the time, it has to sound crazy when we talk about these things week after week, right? But we can't continue to ignore this, and this cannot be the norm. And I know that fourth turnings look like this, but I tell you what, this last week on that end, Nick, has been really, 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 really trying. And yeah, let's do better, everybody.
Stay busy, stay with the ones that you love, enjoy the nice weather. I hear it's sunny and warm in most of, at least, the US, and I should tell you that we got some new chickens and ducks, and so when I get home today, there's 4 ducklings and 4 chicks waiting for me. I'm anxious to see them.
Vax and wax, baby. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with my co-host, Mr. Nick Hodge. This was episode 113 of Bizarro World. Thanks for listening, everybody. Say goodbye, Nick.
See ya.